They say that before there was day, there was a single breath of darkness, and from that breath came fire. Fire, they said, was the soul of the gods burning upon the earth. In the heart of a mist-covered valley, a tribe guarded that flame for as long as memory reached. They called it the Heart of Dawn, a fire said to have been lit by the hands of the first men when God still walked among them. And since that moment, it had never gone out. Not once, not even through the fiercest rains or the blackest nights. Aru, a young man with eyes full of wonder, would sit before the flame every night. He watched it dance, as if its movement spoke a secret language only the spirits could understand. His grandmother, the oldest in the tribe, would whisper, "As long as the fire breathes, the gods will remember us." But Aru was not sure he believed that. To him, the fire felt less like a god's gift and more like a human sorrow, something fragile, aching, and alive. The valley was silent. The huts stood in a circle around the flame, guardians frozen in time. At sunset, the children would gather to hear tales of the first dawn, the moment light first fell upon the world and men ceased to fear the night. But lately, the fire seemed weaker, its glow dimmer. The shadows grew longer every day. One afternoon, as Aru cleaned the ashes, a spark leapt and burned his hand. Instead of pain, he felt something else, a calling. He looked at the small burn and thought he saw a spiral drawn in the skin, the same spiral carved on the oldest stones of the valley. "Maybe fire doesn't belong to the gods," he murmured. "Maybe it has always belonged to us." That night, the storm came. The wind howled through the caves. Clouds devoured the sky. The elders knelt before the fire, begging the heavens for mercy, while the flames thrashed, gasping for air. Aru felt fear, a fear that seemed not just to him, but to the whole world. Thunder roared like an ancient beast. Rain fell so hard it tore the earth apart. And before their eyes, the Heart of Dawn died. Silence followed, a silence heavier than thunder. No one moved, no one breathed. For the first time in generations, darkness was absolute. Without the fire, the stars looked dead. Children wept, elders beat their chests. "The gods have forgotten us," someone cried. "The end of the world has begun," another shouted. Aru knelt in the mud, watching the last embers fade. The rain erased every trace of light, as if the fire had never existed at all. "It can't end like this," he whispered. But the people turned their eyes towards him in fear. "It was him," a woman shouted. "He touched the torch last night." The rumor spread like smoke. The stairs cut like knives. The elders muttered prayers, refusing to say his name. Aru backed away, trembling. He did not know if the fire had died because of him, or because the gods no longer cared. But something began to burn inside him, an invisible flame, whispering, "If the gods cannot bring back the light, then you must." Days passed. The tribe tried to relight the fire with stones, with branches, with prayers. Nothing. The sacred flame was gone. The valley grew colder. Hunger became more real than faith. One night, under a faint, broken moon, Aru rose and looked to the northern mountain. From there, it was said, the lightning was born.
The ancients called it the Mountain of Thunder, the place where the gods first set the sky on fire. And in that moment, he understood. He must go there, not to beg, but to find it. He took an empty torch, a piece of charcoal, and a pendant that had belonged to his mother. The village slept, wrapped in silence and despair. Only his grandmother woke as she heard his steps. "Where are you going, child?" she whispered. "I'm going to find the fire, grandmother." She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes reflected the flame that no longer existed. "If you find it," she said softly, "don't bring it back. Leave it where the world can never extinguish it again." Aru said nothing. He only nodded and walked into the darkness. The rain met him like a warning, but he did not stop. His bare feet sank into the mud. His breath merged with the wind. And as he climbed the first hill, he felt something new. The fire wasn't dead. It was waiting. In the distance, lightning struck the mountain. Thunder roared across the valley like a promise. Aru smiled, rain on his face, and whispered, "If the gods have fallen silent, then my voice will awaken them." The fire of mankind had just begun.
The night after the fire died, silence spread through the valley like a wound. The tribe gathered in the dark, faces lit only by cold stars. Aru stood before them, holding the empty torch that once held the sacred flame. He felt the eyes of the elders pierce him, not with anger, but with the quiet despair of those who have lost faith. The chief spoke softly. "The gods have turned their faces from us. The fire is gone. The warmth of the world has ended." But Aru could not accept that. He had grown up with stories of the first flame, how it had been stolen from the heavens, how it burned through generations as a sign that the spirits still watched over humankind. He refused to let that story die. When the dawn came, pale and gray, Aru left the camp. He carried his torch, his father's blade, and a single ember sealed in clay, the last breath of the old fire. The others watched him go, too broken to follow. Only Nara, the tribe's seer, whispered after him, "The gods test those they love most. Do not let the wind take your heart." Days turned into weeks. Aru crossed frozen rivers and blackened forests. He climbed slopes of ash where lightning had split the trees in two. Each night he whispered to the ember inside the clay jar, praying it would survive until he reached the mountain where thunder was born. But the world seemed to resist him. Storms rose without warning. Wolves followed his scent. Once he woke to find his jar cracked, the ember dimming. He held it in his hands, crying out into the rain, begging the gods not to abandon him too. In that moment, lightning struck the mountain ahead. A blinding flash, a roar that shook the valley. Aru felt something inside him ignite, not fire, but will. He pressed on. At the edge of the world, the mountain of thunder waited. Its peak was lost in storm clouds that never rested. The ground trembled with the breath of the sky. For days, Aru climbed, hands bleeding, clothes soaked in rain. Then came the night he reached the summit. The sky opened in fury.
lightning splitting the heavens into fire and sound. Aru raised his torch high, shouting into the storm, "Give me your flame, for my people, for the first light." Thunder answered like a god awakened. A single bolt fell, striking the rock beside him, blinding, deafening, endless. When the light faded, Aru lay on the ground, the torch in his hands burning with white fire. It was alive again. He had done it. But as he looked across the horizon, through the smoke and storm, Aru saw something impossible. Far to the east, another spark was rising into the sky. Another flame, another tribe, another fire reborn. He was not the only one.
The fire burned brighter than any Aru had ever seen. It hissed and danced, alive with something more than heat. It carried a voice, a pulse. He stood before it, trembling, feeling both chosen and condemned. For days he stayed at the summit, guarding the flame against the endless storm. He built a cradle of stone around it, whispering thanks to the sky, to the ancestors, to the unseen gods who had answered. But the thought would not leave him, that other light, the one far to the east. He was not alone in this miracle, and that truth changed everything. When the storm finally broke, the world lay washed and silent. Aru began his descent. The torch, burning white and pure, guided his steps. Every gust of wind seemed to bow before it. Even the beasts that once stalked him now watched from a distance, their eyes reflecting the glow as if they understood what he carried. As he reached the valley, he saw smoke in the distance, not from destruction, but from life. Fires, dozens of them, too far to belong to his tribe. His heart pounded. Could it be another people, another keeper of the flame? When he returned to his village, the people ran to meet him. Their faces, pale and cold from weeks of darkness, lit up at the sight of the torch. Children cried, elders fell to their knees. Aru lifted the flame high. "The fire lives," he said. "It was never ours alone. It belongs to all who still believe." They rebuilt the hearth, rekindled their fires, and sang again to the dawn. The warmth returned, but Aru's eyes remained on the horizon, where that distant glow still burned. That night, he sat with Nara, the seer, beside the fire. She stared into the flames, as if seeing beyond them. "The gods have spoken," she murmured. "You carried the light to prove our faith. But now others have found it too." "What does it mean?" Aru asked. Nara smiled faintly. "It means the fire was never a gift. It was a seed. And it has begun to grow again, everywhere." In the following days, messengers came from distant lands, strangers who also claimed to have seen lightning grant them flame. Each tribe told a similar story. Each believed they had been chosen. And so began a time of both wonder and fear. For when many carry the light, not all will use it to warm. Some will use it to burn. Aru watched the new fires spread across the earth and felt the weight of destiny settle upon his shoulders once more. The gods had not ended their test. They had only begun it. He looked at the torch in his hands, the same torch that had once held the first flame, the same that now burns with stormlight, and whispered, "If the world must choose how to use its fire,
then I will walk it again. The night wind rose, carrying sparks into the dark sky, tiny stars being born again, one by one. And somewhere beyond the horizon, a second figure watched his own fire burn, waiting for the day their paths would cross.
The world had changed. Where once there was only darkness, now the land burned with light. Villages, camps, and forgotten tribes had all claimed the gift of fire, each believing their flame was sacred, their gods the true givers. But fire, once shared, became a weapon, and the age of warmth was ending. Aru stood upon a cliff overlooking a valley scattered with distant fires. The sky was red, not from the dawn, but from smoke and war. He had seen it coming. For months, whispers reached him, tribes raiding others for control of the flame, claiming their light was purer. He closed his eyes, feeling the same wind that once guided him to the mountain of thunder. Now it carried only the scent of ashes. Down below, the fire keepers, his own people, built walls of stone around their sacred hearth. They had become what they once feared, protectors of something they refused to share. Nara, now older and weary, confronted Aru one night. "You taught them that the fire belonged to all," she said, "and yet they hoard it like gold." Aru gazed into the flames, silent. "It was meant to unite us," he murmured, "but men will always find a way to divide what the gods give freely." Days later, a messenger arrived, burned, limping, his eyes wild with terror. "The eastern tribe," he gasped. "They come with blades of fire. They burn villages that will not kneel." The name struck Aru like thunder, the tribe of the second flame. The same people he had seen that night across the horizon, the same light that mirrored his own. They, too, believed they were chosen. As the armies gathered, the nights grew redder. Across the plains, hundreds of fires flickered like a sea of restless souls. Aru led his people into the heart of the valley, where both tribes would meet. The earth trembled with the march of men, and for the first time, the fire that had once given life would now take it. He raised his torch high and shouted above the wind, "If fire is to choose its master, then let it burn those unworthy of it, even me." The storm answered. Lightning split the clouds, illuminating faces twisted by fear, faith, and fury. When the clash began, it was unlike any war the world had ever known. Spears met flame. Ashes turned to dust in the air. Men screamed not in hatred, but in belief. Each side fought for their gods, their ancestors, their fire. And in the center, Aru fought not to destroy, but to stop the storm he himself had awakened. He searched for their leader, a tall figure cloaked in black, holding a torch that burned blue. When their eyes met through the chaos, Aru knew this man was the mirror of his destiny, the second keeper, the other flame. Their torches met with a roar that shook the valley. The fires around them dimmed as if the two lights were devouring each other. Blue and gold twisted together, neither yielding. And in that moment, both men saw visions,
of the first dawn, of gods watching, waiting. The truth pierced them like lightning. The gods had never wanted worship. They wanted balance. Two fires, two choices, creation and destruction. As the sky cracked open, rain poured down in sheets. The fires hissed and died. The men, blinded by smoke and fear, fled into the night. Only Aru and the stranger remained, their torches now faint embers. The man lowered his weapon. "You sought to keep the fire alive," he said softly. "I sought to control it. Perhaps neither of us were worthy." Aru nodded, drenched and trembling. "Then perhaps it's time the fire chose for itself." Together, they placed their torches in the mud, letting the rain claim them. The last flames flickered, then vanished. And for the first time, the world was silent. But deep beneath the earth, where the rain could not reach, a single ember still glowed, waiting.
The rain had fallen for 7 days and 7 nights. The valleys were drowned. The mountains whispered only silence. And in that silence, the world believed the fire was gone forever. But beneath the ashes of war, deep within the cracked earth, something still breathed. A faint red glow, buried among bones and stone. It was small, fragile, forgotten, yet it pulsed, as if remembering what it once was. An ember, the last heartbeat of Eden. Far away, Aru awoke in the ruins of his camp. The storm had stripped the land bare. His torch was gone. Around him only mud, smoke, and the dead. He could not tell if the war had ended or if he had simply survived it. He wandered through the empty fields where once thousands had gathered. Now only charred spears remained, black silhouettes against a gray dawn. He thought of the stranger, the man with the blue flame. Had he perished? Had the gods punished them both? Days turned to weeks. Aru lived in silence. The warmth had vanished from the world. Even the sun seemed dimmer, as if ashamed of what man had done with its gift. Then, one night, as he slept inside the hollow of a dead tree, he dreamed. He saw a woman walking through fire unharmed. Her hands cupped something small, glowing faintly, and she whispered to it like a mother to a child. When she lifted her gaze, Aru recognized her. It was Nara. Her eyes were filled with light. "The fire still breathes," she said, "but not where men can find it. You must go beneath the earth." Aru awoke, gasping. The dream had felt real, too real. The next morning, he followed the path down into a ravine carved by the floodwaters. There, he found a cave hidden behind a curtain of vines. The air inside was warm, alive. As he stepped deeper, the darkness began to glow, soft red veins pulsing within the stone, as if the earth itself carried blood. And there, in the center of the cavern, surrounded by melted obsidian, lay the ember. It was tiny, no larger than a seed, yet it burned without consuming. When Aru approached, the air trembled. He felt its voice in his chest, not in his ears.
You carried me once, it said, but now you must become me. Aru knelt before it, tears streaming down his face. He remembered the wars, the greed, the death, all born from this small spark. I am not worthy, he whispered. The ember flared just once, and his shadow stretched long across the cavern wall. None are, it replied, but those who remember what warmth means will never let me die. He reached out, hands shaking, and touched it. It did not burn. It entered him, flowing like molten light through his veins. The pain was endless, yet pure. When he rose, his eyes glowed faintly gold. The fire no longer lived in the world, it lived within him. He walked from the cave at dawn, and as he did, the first rays of the sun broke through the clouds. The world was still wounded, but something new stirred in the soil, green shoots, faint and trembling. The gods had taken their gift from men, but they had given it back to the earth. In the years that followed, stories spread of a lone wanderer whose breath steamed even in the coldest nights, whose eyes shimmered like coals. Some called him cursed, others called him the son of the flame. But Aru no longer cared for names. He knew what he was, the keeper, the memory, the living ember. And though the wars had ended, the world had not forgotten what it could become. For deep in the north, among tribes untouched by the storm, another fire had been born. One blue, one cold, one burning for conquest. The second flame had survived too. And so the cycle would begin again.
Snow fell where rain once ruled. Years had passed since the ember merged with Aru. Years of quiet wandering, of rebuilding what was lost. The valleys where men once burned each other for fire were now fields of green. The air was gentler, the world was healing. But far to the north, where the sun never fully rose, something old had awakened again. A fire, not of warmth, but of ice. A flame that gave no light, only hunger. And those who followed it no longer prayed, they obeyed. Aru felt it before he saw it. The warmth within him began to fade, as if the earth itself had drawn a slow breath inward. Animals fled the forests, rivers turned to mirrors of frozen glass. Even the stars seemed colder. At first, he thought it was the gods reclaiming their gift. But then came the dreams, shadows of men wrapped in frost, carrying torches of blue fire. Among them, a figure he knew, the man from the war, the keeper of the second flame. He woke in a sweat that turned to vapor in the freezing air. The world had changed again. And so, once more, he walked, through forests turned to crystal, across plains that sang beneath the frost. At night, he could see them in the distance, a procession of blue lights moving through the tundra. They left behind not ashes, but silence. Everywhere they passed, life fell still. When Aru reached an abandoned camp, he found strange marks carved into the ice. Spirals, circles, symbols of the old gods, twisted into new shapes. It was no longer worship, it was command. In the center of the camp, a single torch still burned.
Not gold, not red, but pale, almost white. When he approached, the air turned bitter cold. He reached toward it, and it whispered, "You should not have lived." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, from the torch, from the snow, from his own heartbeat. You carried the fire, Aru. You healed the land. But balance demands return. The flame of warmth cannot exist without the flame of cold. The light flared, and before him stood the man he thought had perished, the second keeper, now cloaked in ice. His eyes were pale as glass, his breath like fog. "You remember me," he said. "We fought for gods who no longer watch. Now I serve what comes after them." Aru felt it before he saw it. The warmth within him began to fade, as if the earth itself had drawn a slow breath inward. Animals fled the forests, rivers turned to mirrors of frozen glass. Even the stars seemed colder. At first, he thought it was the gods reclaiming their gift. But then came the dreams. Shadows of men wrapped in frost, carrying torches of blue fire. Among them, a figure he knew. The man from the war. The keeper of the second flame. He woke in a sweat that turned to vapor in the freezing air. The world had changed again. And so, once more, he walked. Through forests turned to crystal, across plains that sang beneath the frost. At night, he could see them in the distance, a procession of blue lights moving through the tundra. They left behind not ashes, but silence. Everywhere they passed, life fell still. When Aru reached an abandoned camp, he found strange marks carved into the ice. Spirals, circles, symbols of the old gods, twisted into new shapes. It was no longer worship, it was command. In the center of the camp, a single torch still burned. Not gold, not red, but pale, almost white. When he approached, the air turned bitter cold. He reached toward it, and it whispered, "You should not have lived." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, from the torch, from the snow, from his own heartbeat. You carried the fire, Aru. You healed the land. But balance demands return. The flame of warmth cannot exist without the flame of cold. The light flared, and before him stood the man he thought had perished, the second keeper, now cloaked in ice. His eyes were pale as glass, his breath like fog. "You remember me," he said. "We fought for gods who no longer watch. Now I serve what comes after them." Aru's voice shook. "You call that thing a god?" The man smiled, and frost spread from his feet across the ground. "It is older than gods. It is the silence before fire, the stillness before dawn. It was waiting for us to fail." They circled each other, two remnants of a forgotten age, two halves of the same creation, fire and frost, light and shadow. "Why bring the cold back?" Aru demanded. "After everything we've learned, after what the world suffered." The man lifted his torch, the cold flame pulsing like a heartbeat. "Because warmth breeds weakness. When men fear the dark, they grow strong. When they are comfortable, they forget. He thrust the torch into the ground. Ice exploded outward in a wave. Trees cracked. The wind howled like a living thing. Aru fell to his knees, clutching his chest. The ember within him flickered, struggling, suffocating. He pressed his hand to the frozen soil, whispering, "I will not let the world die again." The ground answered. Through the cracks, faint light began to seep, gold veins running beneath the frost. The warmth of the earth itself rising to meet the cold. The stranger hesitated. For the first time, the cold flame trembled. He looked at Aru and whispered, almost with sorrow, "You still believe in mercy." Aru rose, his eyes blazing once more. "Not mercy," he said. "Balance." The two lights met again, gold and blue, and the world shuddered. Frost met fire. Night met dawn. And in that collision, the gods themselves seemed to awaken from their long sleep. When the light faded, both men were gone. Only the snow remained, hissing softly where embers met ice. And far away, deep beneath the earth, the twin flames burned side by side, waiting.
Silence had returned to the world, but it was a silence full of tension. The snow melted where it could, rivers ran cautiously, and the wind whispered secrets of the flames beneath the earth. Aru had vanished from the eyes of men, yet his presence lingered, a golden pulse felt by those who believed in warmth. The second flame, pale and cold, moved through the northern lands, leaving a hush over everything it touched. And far above, in the heavens, the gods stirred. For eons they had watched quietly, letting humans claim fire and then fight over it. But now the balance had shifted. They remembered the children of the earth, the fragile ones who had carried their gifts not with cruelty, but with hope. One star fell, then another. The sky ignited with light unseen in generations. Lightning danced without storm, thunder rumbled without wind. The gods themselves had returned. In the valley where Aru had once held the first flame, a soft golden light bathed the trees. The people awoke, hearts pounding, feeling warmth where frost had lingered. Elders wept, children laughed. It was not just fire, it was blessing. Aru appeared, not as a man, but as something greater. His eyes burned like embers, yet his body radiated calm. He walked through the village and touched the earth with his hands. Where he stepped, grass turned green, flowers rose, streams bubbled with crystal water. The villagers fell to their knees. "You are?" one asked. "I am the memory of the flame," Aru said softly. "I am what lives when fire and frost meet. I am the bridge between what is lost and what must be found." But the second flame had not been destroyed. It lingered in the north, whispering through the ice, calling men to obedience, to conquest. Its keeper remained, watching, waiting for the moment to strike. Aru lifted his gaze to the horizon, feeling the cold pulse through the land. He knew the balance was delicate. One misstep, one spark of hatred,
and all could return to darkness. Then, in a voice that sounded like all the rivers of the world flowing together, the gods spoke. Child of flame, child of man, the world remembers you. Protect it, or it will be lost again. Aru closed his eyes. He felt the weight of every ember ever carried, every frost ever cast, every choice that had led humanity to this moment. It was overwhelming, but in that weight he found clarity. He would not fight alone. He would awaken the hearts of men, not just to fear or awe, but to responsibility. The golden flame within him pulsed stronger. From it, visions arose. Children tending fires, tribes building not walls, but bridges. Humans walking in unity, guided by courage and hope. The gods watched, and for the first time smiled, not with judgment, but with expectation. A child of man had remembered what they had forgotten, that fire, in its truest form, was not a weapon. It was life. Aru turned to the north, sensing the faint glow of the cold flame. He whispered, "I will find you, not to destroy, but to teach." And far above, lightning arced across the heavens. The gods were watching. The children of the earth had been remembered, and the last war had only begun. Not of men against men, but of humans against the fear of losing what they had yet to fully understand.
The world had changed forever. The rains, the snow, the storms, they had all carved lessons into the earth. And now the land stood at the edge of something new, something fragile, something sacred. Aru walked through valleys and mountains, feeling the pulse of the ember within him. It was no longer just a flame. It was memory, hope, and will combined. Every heartbeat resonated with the fire's rhythm, reminding him that life itself was a gift that needed guarding. He traveled to the north, where the cold flame had taken root. There, the ice whispered, calling for power, obedience, dominance. The keeper of the blue flame stood tall, his eyes pale, unyielding. "You seek to teach," the keeper said, voice sharp as the frost around him. "And yet, the world has forgotten what balance means." Aru stepped forward, the golden ember glowing against the pale ice. "I do not seek to command," he said. "I seek to awaken. Fire and frost do not exist to destroy, but to shape, to test, to remind us who we are." The two men raised their flames. Gold met blue. Warmth collided with cold. And, for the first time, both flames understood each other, not as enemies, but as halves of a greater whole. The world shuddered, mountains quaked, rivers boiled and froze. Yet, amidst the chaos, a single truth emerged. Fire is eternal, not because it burns endlessly, but because it lives in those who remember its purpose. Aru placed his hands against the ice, and slowly the frost softened. The cold flame pulsed, hesitant, then began to merge with the golden warmth. Light and shadow intertwined.
Balance was restored, not by conquest, but by understanding. The northern lands thawed, streams flowed again, creatures returned, and humans, scattered and weary, looked to the sky and felt hope ignite within their hearts. From that moment on, Aru became the eternal keeper of the flame, not a god, not a ruler, but a reminder. He traveled silently among the tribes, teaching them the essence of fire. It is not to be hoarded, nor feared, nor used to dominate. It is to be carried, shared, and honored. And somewhere, deep beneath the earth, the ember glowed brighter than ever. It whispered to every living being, in every tongue, across every valley and mountain. Remember, the flame is eternal in the hearts of those who love life. The gods watched once more. They no longer spoke in thunder or lightning. They observed quietly, their presence a subtle warmth across the world. For the children of the earth had remembered, and the eternal flame would never die again.